My dad laughed when he handed me the deed. Not a warm laugh. Not proud. The kind that makes you feel like the punchline. Your brother gets the villa, he said, clinking his glass against Tyler's champagne. Ocean view, private gate, real investment. Then he slid a single sheet of paper toward me. And you, Nora, you get the old parking lot on Carter Street. Tyler grinned. Hey, at least you can always sleep under the stars. Everyone chuckled. I didn't. I stared at the address printed in bold, my chest tight but my face calm. An empty parking lot, cracked asphalt, weeds pushing through concrete, a joke dressed up as generosity. Be grateful, Dad added casually. It's still land. Grateful. For being underestimated, for being dismissed, for being given scraps while my brother got a kingdom. I folded the deed carefully and stood up. Thank you, I said evenly. Just don't ask for a share when I turn your joke into something worth owning. Dad never invited me over unless there was an audience. So when his text said, family dinner, important, I already knew this wasn't about catching up. It was about control. I walked into the house I grew up in and immediately felt 17 again, too loud, too stubborn, too difficult. The chandelier glowed warmly above the dining table, silverware arranged like we were hosting royalty. Tyler was already there, leaning back in his chair like he owned the room, and apparently, now he owned a villa too. Well, look who showed up, he smirked. Did the garage close early? It's called a business, I replied calmly. You should try one. Mom shot me a warning look. Let's not start. Dad cleared his throat, and the room obeyed. That was his gift, commanding silence without raising his voice. I've decided to divide my assets now rather than later, he announced. It's time you both stand on your own. Tyler's smile widened. Smart move. Dad handed him a thick folder first. Blueprints, photos, keys. I watched my brother's face light up as he flipped through glossy images of marble floors and ocean views. The villa is yours, Dad said proudly. You'll maintain the family name properly. Tyler stood up and hugged him. You won't regret it. No one looked at me. Then Dad slid my single sheet across the table. The Carter Street property, he said flatly. It's technically commercial land. I let out a soft breath. The abandoned parking lot? Mom forced a bright tone. It has potential. Tyler burst out laughing. Potential? For what? Pigeon conventions? Dad gave him a half smile before turning to me. You always said you wanted to build something from scratch. Now you can. I stared at him. You mean from nothing? He shrugged. Opportunity depends on perspective. There it was. The performance of fairness. Tyler raised his glass again. To Nora. May she enjoy her open sky. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. Why is his asset turnkey and mine a demolition project? Dad's expression hardened. Because Tyler understands responsibility. I blinked. I've worked since I was 16. Yes, Dad replied coolly. With your hands. The implication hung in the air. Not corporate, not impressive, not worthy, Mom added gently. Sweetheart, this is your chance to prove yourself. Prove myself. As if my entire life hadn't been one long audition for approval that never came. I folded the deed slowly. The paper made a soft, deliberate sound in the silence. You really think this is equal? I asked. Dad met my eyes without hesitation. Life isn't equal, it's earned. Something inside me shifted, then not breaking, not collapsing, hardening. Tyler leaned toward me, lowering his voice. Don't make this awkward, just take the gift. I stood up, smoothing my jacket like I wasn't standing in the middle of my own humiliation. I will, I said. Dad seemed satisfied. Good. I walked toward the door, feeling their relief at my compliance. Then I stopped. You're right about one thing, I said without turning around. Life is earned. I face them fully now. And when I earn something from that parking lot, when it becomes more than any villa you've ever stepped inside, don't expect to be part of it, Tyler scoffed. Ambitious. Dad's smile was thin. We'll see. I nodded once. Yes, I said quietly. We will. The next morning, I drove straight to Carter Street. No makeup, no second guessing, just coffee and stubbornness. The lot looked even worse in daylight. Cracked asphalt split down the middle like a scar. Weeds clawed through the pavement. A rusted sign leaned sideways, barely holding on to its post. Someone had spray-painted "Forgotten" across the fence. I parked and stepped out slowly. "So this is my inheritance," I muttered. A gust of wind pushed loose paper across the concrete. The place felt abandoned not just physically, but symbolically, like something written off years ago, like me. I walked the perimeter, counting steps, measuring space, visualizing lines where others only saw emptiness. Across the street was a brewery, 2 blocks down apartments. On weekends, people flooded the Riverwalk just a few streets over. This wasn't dead space. It was unused space. There's a difference. I crouched and touched the asphalt. Rough, solid, stable. "You wanted me to start from nothing, Dad?" I whispered. "Fine." I opened my phone and began taking photos. Angles, entrances, corners. I sketched quick ideas in my notes: app food trucks, lighting, music nights, vendor booths. By the time I got back in my car, my heart wasn't heavy anymore. It was racing. At the auto shop later that day, I couldn't focus. Sam noticed. "You look like someone who just got dumped or just got inspired," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Both," I replied. He leaned against a toolbox. "Talk." So I told him everything. The dinner. The villa. The parking lot. The laughter. Sam didn't interrupt. When I finished, he nodded once. "So what are you gonna build?" I blinked. "You believe I can?" He shrugged. "You rebuilt a transmission no one else would touch. You work 16-hour shifts without complaining. Why wouldn't I?" That simple question hit harder than anything my father had ever said. "I'm thinking food trucks," I admitted. "Event nights. Maybe live music. Make it a place people actually want to go." Sam whistled softly. "Carter Street? That's bold. Is that code for impossible?" "No," he said. "That's code for if you pull it off, it'll be huge." I hesitated. "I'll need startup money. Permits, fencing, lighting, insurance." "How much?" he asked calmly. I named the number, bracing for the reaction. Sam didn't flinch. "Bring me a plan. If it makes sense, I'll back you." I stared at him. "Why?" "Because someone should," he said simply. That night, I stayed up until 2 in the morning building spreadsheets. Vendor estimates, revenue projections, permit fees, marketing costs. I researched city regulations until my eyes burned. If my father tried to come after me later, I would be untouchable. Legally airtight. 3 days later, I walked into City Hall with a folder thicker than Tyler's villa contract. The clerk looked at the address and raised an eyebrow. "You own Carter Street?" "Yes." "You planning to sell it?" "No," I said. "I'm planning to transform it." She gave me a long look, half skepticism, half curiosity. "Well," she said finally, "you'll need event permits, zoning clearance, sanitation approval, and noise compliance." "I already printed the forms," I replied, sliding them across the counter. For the first time, she smiled. "Ambitious," she said. "That's what they keep telling me." When I stepped outside City Hall with stamped paperwork in my hand, something clicked into place. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was strategy. Dad thought he handed me a burden. Tyler thought he handed me a punchline. But what they really gave me was something they didn't recognize. Freedom. No expectations, no comparisons, no shadow of a golden child. Just a slab of concrete and my own imagination. And imagination, when paired with discipline, is dangerous. I drove back to Carter Street that evening and stood in the center of the lot as the sun dipped low. I closed my eyes and pictured it. String lights overhead, music drifting through warm air, food sizzling, people laughing, lines at the entrance. A name formed in my mind, sharp and satisfying. If Tyler said I could sleep under the stars, then I'd build a place where people paid to stand beneath them. I smiled for the first time since the dinner. "Careful what you give me, Dad," I murmured, "because I build." 3 weeks later, Carter Street didn't look abandoned anymore. It glowed. String lights stretched from one corner of the lot to the other, warm and golden against the night sky. The cracked asphalt was cleaned and sealed. Gravel filled the worst gaps. Planters lined the fence. A small stage stood at the far end, framed by a simple wooden arch with a new sign above it, "Starlight Market," a subtle reminder of Tyler's favorite joke. You can always sleep under the stars. Now people would. Voluntarily. And they'd pay for it. I stood near the entrance, clipboard in hand, watching the first food truck roll into position. The smell of barbecue drifted across the lot. A taco truck pulled in next, then a coffee van, then a dessert trailer with neon pink lettering that flickered playfully. Lena, my vendor coordinator, hurried over. "We already have 50 people in line," she whispered excitedly. 50? I blinked. "We haven't even opened the gate." "Social media," she grinned. "People love a comeback story." I swallowed. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from something dangerously close to hope. I grabbed the microphone near the stage. "Okay," I said to the small group of staff and vendors gathered around me. "This isn't just about food. It's about experience. Safety first, respect always. If anything feels off, you tell me immediately. We do this right." They nodded. Because we were doing this right. Permits printed and displayed. Fire extinguishers placed. Security hired. Insurance active. Every box checked twice. If my family tried anything, they'd find nothing to attack. At 6 p.m., we opened the gates. The crowd flowed in slowly at first, curious, cautious. Couples. College students. Families with kids tugging at their parents' sleeves. Then the line doubled, then tripled. Music started, soft acoustic guitar filling the air. Laughter followed. Orders were shouted, numbers called, plates handed over. I walked through the crowd, heart pounding, absorbing every detail. "Who owns this place?" someone asked near the taco truck. I hesitated before answering. "I do." The woman smiled. "It's incredible. We needed something like this." Needed. That word stayed with me. By 8 p.m., the lot was full. The string lights shimmered above hundreds of faces. The stage lights glowed softly. Food trucks ran at capacity. My staff moved like a practice team. I checked the revenue app on my phone and nearly dropped it. We had already surpassed my conservative projections. Lena grabbed my arm. "Nora, look." I followed her gaze toward the entrance. "Mom." Melissa stood just outside the gate, perfectly dressed as usual, scanning the scene like she was evaluating a property. My stomach twisted. Of course. Opening night. She wouldn't miss the chance to judge. She stepped inside slowly, heels clicking against gravel, eyes moving from vendor to vendor. When she spotted me, she forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So," she said, "this is what you've done." "Yes," I replied evenly. She looked around again. "It's busy. That's the goal." Her lips pressed together. "It's loud. It's alive." Mom folded her arms. "Is it safe?" I held her gaze. "Fully permitted. Fully insured." She blinked, clearly not expecting that answer. A group of teenagers rushed past us, laughing, carrying trays of food. Mom watched them, then lowered her voice. "Your father didn't think you'd follow through." "I know." She hesitated. "How much are you making?" There it was. Not, "Are you happy?" Not, "Are you proud?" Numbers. I smiled slightly. "Enough." Her jaw tightened. Behind her, I saw another familiar figure step through the gate. Tyler. He wore a fitted blazer like he was attending an opening gala instead of confronting his sister. He stopped in the center of the lot, turning slowly, taking it all in: the crowd, the music, the stage, the line at the dessert truck. His expression shifted from amusement to confusion to something sharper. "What is this?" he demanded. I walked toward him calmly. "It's my parking lot," he scoffed. "You turned it into a carnival." "Market," I corrected. "Community space." He looked at the stage, then at the line wrapped around the entrance. "People are actually paying to be here." "Yes." Tyler laughed once, but it sounded forced. "This won't last." "Maybe not," I said. "But it's lasting tonight." Mom stepped between us slightly. "Nora, we just didn't expect you to take it this far." I tilted my head. "You didn't expect me to take it anywhere." Tyler's jaw tightened. "Don't act like this makes you better than us." I looked around the lights, the music, the families smiling under the sky. "I'm not acting," I said quietly. For a moment, none of us spoke. The guitarist on stage shifted into a louder song. Applause rippled through the lot. The scent of grilled onions filled the air. Tyler leaned closer, lowering his voice. Dad thinks you should discuss profit sharing. I let out a soft, incredulous laugh. Profit sharing. It was family land, he insisted. It was a joke when you handed it to me, I replied. Remember? Mom's voice sharpened. You're being ungrateful. That word again. I met her eyes. No, I'm being independent. Tyler crossed his arms. You can't just cut us out. I stepped closer, keeping my tone calm but firm. Watch me. The music swelled. Someone cheered near the stage. Behind me, Starlot pulsed with life, and in front of me stood the people who once laughed at the idea that I could build anything worth standing in. Tyler glanced around again, clearly aware that eyes were on us now. This isn't over, he muttered. I smiled softly. No, I agreed. It's just getting started. The calls began the next morning. First Dad. I watched his name flash across my screen while I stood in the middle of Starlot, reviewing vendor invoices. I let it ring. Then Mom. Then Tyler. 3 missed calls in under 10 minutes. I exhaled slowly. Here it comes. They didn't show up to congratulate me. They didn't show up to apologize. They showed up because they smelled money. That afternoon, Dad arrived in person. Not in casual clothes. Not as a father. In a tailored suit. Tyler followed half a step behind him, jaw tight, sunglasses on like he was shielding himself from something brighter than the sun. They didn't wait at the entrance. They walked straight in. I saw Lena tense from across the lot. I gave her a small nod. It's fine. Dad stopped in front of me without greeting. We need to discuss this situation, he said. This situation? I repeated. Tyler gestured around us. This operation. I folded my arms. You mean my business? Dad's lips pressed into a thin line. The land was originally acquired through family assets and legally transferred to me, I replied calmly. He didn't deny it. Instead, he shifted tactics. You're generating revenue on property that carries our name, he said. That reflects on us. I almost laughed. It reflected on you when it was abandoned too. Tyler stepped closer. You're being defensive. I'm being factual. Dad's voice cooled. We believe it would be appropriate to restructure ownership. There it was. Not a request. A statement. Restructure. I echoed. Into what? A shared entity, he replied smoothly. 50-50. I blinked at him. 50-50? Tyler shrugged. You wouldn't even have this if we hadn't given it to you. I stared at him for a long moment. Given it to me, I repeated quietly. Or discarded it. Dad's eyes hardened. Careful. No, I said evenly. You be careful. The air shifted. I lowered my voice, but I didn't step back. You handed me that deed in front of everyone and laughed. You told me to sleep under the stars. You said I should be grateful. Tyler scoffed. It was a joke. It stopped being a joke when I signed the permit paperwork, I replied. Dad's jaw tightened. We're trying to resolve this amicably. No, I said calmly. You're trying to reclaim something you didn't believe in. Mom's car pulled into the lot just then. Perfect timing. She stepped out quickly, scanning the crowd like she expected a confrontation. Nora, she said sharply. Let's not do this in public. You chose public, I answered. Her expression flickered. Dad inhaled slowly. You're making a mistake by isolating yourself from your family. There it was again. Family. I looked around at the vendors unloading supplies, the staff adjusting lights, the early customers already lining up. This, I said quietly, gesturing around me, is the first thing I've ever built that wasn't measured against Tyler. Mom crossed her arms. That's not fair. I gave her a tired smile. It never was. Dad changed tone again, softer now. Nora, be practical. You don't have experience managing something this size long-term. I hired professionals, I replied. Accountant, attorney, compliance consultant. Tyler blinked. Attorney? Yes. Dad's eyes narrowed slightly. For what? He asked. For protection, I said. Just in case anyone tries to interfere. Silence. Mom shifted uncomfortably. Interfere? We would never. You already are. I cut in gently. Tyler let out a frustrated laugh. You're paranoid. No, I said. I'm prepared. Dad studied me like I was a stranger. And maybe I was. Because the version of me who used to shrink under that look was gone. You're choosing money over blood, Mom said quietly. That one hurt. But not the way she expected. I'm choosing respect, I replied. Dad's patience snapped just slightly. If you refuse to negotiate, he said evenly, we'll explore our options. I held his gaze without blinking. Do that, I said. He seemed surprised. You're not worried? Tyler asked. About what? About what we could do? I smiled faintly. Try, I said. They stood there a moment longer, clearly expecting me to fold. When I didn't, Dad turned first. This isn't over, he said. Tyler followed him, but not before glancing back at the crowd again, the music, the laughter, the packed tables. Mom lingered half a second longer. You're tearing this family apart, she whispered. I shook my head gently. No, I said. I'm just refusing to hold it together alone. She didn't respond. They left. And as their car disappeared down Carter Street, I felt something settle inside me. Not fear. Not victory. Clarity. If they couldn't control me through guilt, they'd try something else. And this time, I would be ready. I knew my father well enough to understand one thing. If he couldn't control me openly, he would do it quietly. The first one-star review appeared 2 days later. Overcrowded. Unsafe. Owner has no respect for family values. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Family values. The phrasing was too familiar. Then, another review popped up. Heard they don't have proper permits. Wouldn't risk it. My stomach tightened. And then another. 3, within an hour. I exhaled slowly. So this is how we're playing, I muttered. Lena noticed my expression. What happened? I turned my phone toward her. She frowned. These look coordinated. They are. Do you want to respond? Yes, I said, but not emotionally. That was the trap. They wanted me angry, reactive, sloppy. Instead, I drafted calm, factual replies. All permits are publicly displayed at the entrance. We pass regular safety inspections. We welcome feedback and transparency. Within hours, regular customers began replying on my behalf. This place is amazing. Best new spot in town. Ignore the fake drama. I smiled faintly. The public sees more than people think. But they didn't stop at reviews. 3 days later, a city inspector arrived unannounced. Anonymous complaint, he said, adjusting his clipboard. Noise levels and seating layout. I nodded calmly. Of course. He checked the decibel meter within range, reviewed fire lanes clear, inspected food vendor spacing compliant. After 20 minutes, he sighed. You're good, he said quietly. Everything's in order. I assumed it would be, I replied. He hesitated before leaving. Sometimes, anonymous complaints are personal. I'm aware. When he drove away, I stood still for a moment. It wasn't fear I felt. It was disappointment. Not because they tried to hurt my business, but because they tried to do it indirectly. Another inspection came the following week. Then another. Each time, we passed. Each time, I documented everything. I forwarded copies to Rachel, my attorney. This is harassment, she said during our call. But it's subtle. They're trying to exhaust you. They won't, I replied. Good. Because legally, you're untouchable if you stay disciplined. So I doubled down. I added additional signage clarifying permits. Installed a live decibel display during concerts. Published our inspection history on the website. If they wanted transparency, I would give them so much of it they'd choke on it. Meanwhile, Starlot kept growing. We introduced weekend craft markets, a local art night, a charity fundraiser for trade scholarships. Attendance doubled, revenue tripled, and every success felt like a quiet answer to every insult I'd ever swallowed. But the pressure started leaking into other areas. Sam pulled me aside at the shop one afternoon. Richard came by, he said. My chest tightened. Here? Asked about your loan. Subtly implied it wasn't wise to back unstable ventures. I clenched my jaw. What did you say? Sam smiled. I said I believe in returns. Relief washed through me. They're trying to isolate you, he added. I know. I drove home that night replaying everything in my head. The reviews. The inspections. The whispers. They weren't trying to destroy the business outright. They were trying to make me doubt it. To make me doubt myself. Because that's how it had always worked. Tyler would mock. Mom would guilt. Dad would frame it as concern. And eventually, I would apologize for existing. But this time was different. This time, I had proof. Numbers, contracts, legal protection. I wasn't a teenager begging for approval. I was a business owner defending an asset. The following Friday, we hosted our largest event yet, a live band, extended vendor list, VIP seating, the lot filled before sunset. As I walked through the crowd, greeting vendors and shaking hands, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not because the war was over, but because I knew I could survive it. Then Lena approached quickly, her face pale. "Nora," she said softly. "Tyler's at the entrance." I looked up, and there he was. Not alone, not smiling, and definitely not calm. The quiet war was about to become loud. Saturday nights at Starlot had started to feel magical. The air was warm, the string lights shimmered overhead, and the hum of conversation blended with live music in a way that felt almost cinematic. Kids danced near the stage. Couples leaned against picnic tables. Vendors shouted out order numbers over the smell of grilled meat and sweet cinnamon dough. It was everything I had imagined. And everything my family had laughed at. I was reviewing ticket scans near the entrance when Lena's voice cut through my focus. "Nora, he's here." I didn't need to ask who. Tyler stepped through the gate like he was walking onto a battlefield. He wasn't dressed casually this time. Dark blazer, crisp shirt, jaw set too tight. Mom followed a few steps behind, visibly anxious. I inhaled slowly and handed my clipboard to Lena. "I've got this," I said. Tyler didn't wait for me to approach. "This ends tonight," he announced loudly enough for people nearby to turn. I kept my voice calm. "You're creating a scene." "You created a scene," he shot back. "You turned a family asset into your personal circus." A few customers nearby exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Tyler," I said evenly, "if you have something to say it privately." "No," he snapped. "Let's be clear. This place exists because Dad gave you that land. And I developed it," I replied. He laughed harshly. "You got lucky." "Luck doesn't file permit paperwork," I said. Mom stepped forward quickly. "Please." "Not here." But Tyler wasn't listening anymore. He gestured around wildly. "You think this makes you better than us?" The music on stage softened, sensing tension in the air. I met his eyes. "It makes me independent." His face flushed. "You're humiliating, Dad," he said through clenched teeth. "People are talking." "People are eating tacos," I replied calmly. A few guests chuckled nervously. Tyler took another step forward, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "You're selfish." That word again. For years, selfish meant not sacrificing enough, not staying quiet enough, not shrinking enough. But now, selfish meant I stopped handing over my success. "I built this," I said quietly. "You didn't." His composure cracked. He grabbed a drink off a nearby table, someone's half-finished soda, and flung it toward the ground near my feet. The splash wasn't violent, but it was loud enough. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Security stepped in immediately, not aggressively, but firmly positioning themselves between Tyler and me. "Sir, you need to calm down," one of them said. "Don't touch me," Tyler barked. Mom's voice rose. "Tyler, stop." Phones were out now. Recording, documenting. Tyler realized it too late. "This place is a joke," he shouted. "She's nothing without our name." The words echoed under the lights, and for a split second, I felt that old sting. Nothing. Then I looked around. At the staff who trusted me, the vendors who signed contracts with me, the customers who chose to be here. I wasn't nothing. I was responsible. I stepped forward slightly, not close enough to escalate, but close enough to be heard. "Tyler," I said clearly, "you are trespassing." He blinked, thrown off by the legal term. "If you continue disrupting my business," I continued, "I will document this and pursue action." He scoffed, but it sounded thinner now. "You'd report your own brother?" "Yes." The word landed harder than any argument. Security gently guided him back toward the entrance. Mom looked torn between anger and panic. "You're overreacting," she whispered to me desperately. "No," I said. "I'm enforcing boundaries." Tyler resisted for a moment, then noticed the phones pointed at him. The murmurs, the eyes. This wasn't the dinner table anymore. This wasn't a controlled environment where he could laugh and I would sit quietly. This was my ground. And the public was watching. He pulled his arm away from security, straightened his jacket and forced a brittle smile. Fine, he muttered. Keep your little market. Then he pointed at me. But don't expect this to end quietly. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Security escorted him out of the gate. The tension lingered for a few seconds after he left. Then the guitarist on stage cleared his throat. "All right, folks," he said lightly into the mic. "Who's ready for the next song?" Laughter broke out. Applause followed. And just like that, Starlet reclaimed its rhythm. Lena approached cautiously. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. Yes. And I meant it. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it didn't control me anymore. Mom lingered a few seconds longer near the entrance. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time that night. "You've changed," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "I've grown." She didn't argue. She simply turned and followed Tyler out into the dark. I stood there under the lights, heart still pounding but posture steady. The crowd resumed eating, laughing, living, and I realized something powerful. The moment I stopped begging for their approval was the moment they lost their leverage. Tyler came to break me publicly. Instead, he exposed himself publicly. And that difference? That was everything. A week after Tyler's meltdown at Starlot, the calls came again. But this time, the tone had changed. No more threats. No more smugness. Just silence. Followed by hesitation. It was Dad who showed up first. Alone. No suit. No commanding presence. Just Richard's shoulders slightly hunched, eyes tired in a way I had never seen before. I was in my office container reviewing payroll when Lena knocked softly. "Your dad's here." I nodded. "Send him in." He stepped inside carefully, glancing around at the organized stacks of files, the framed permits on the wall, the framed photo from opening night with the crowd glowing under the lights. For a moment, he didn't speak. "You've built something real," he said finally. It wasn't praise. It was reluctant acknowledgement. "Yes," I replied. He cleared his throat. "We need to talk." I leaned back in my chair. "About what?" He hesitated, which alone told me everything. "Tyler has financial issues," he admitted. "The villa hasn't been generating the returns we expected. Maintenance costs are high. And his investments didn't work out." Investments. I knew what that meant. Impulse purchases. Overconfidence. Easy money schemes. Dad continued. "We covered some of it, but our reserves are lower than we thought." "And?" I asked calmly. "And we need liquidity." There it was. He didn't say help. He didn't say please. He said liquidity. "Are you asking for a loan?" I asked. He exhaled. "Yes." I studied him for a long moment. This was the man who told me life wasn't equal, it was earned. The man who laughed when I received a slab of concrete. The man who said I should be grateful. "How much?" I asked quietly. He named a number large enough to make most people swallow hard. I didn't flinch. Instead, I opened a drawer and pulled out a prepared folder. Dad's eyes narrowed slightly. "What's that?" "A proposal," I said. He looked confused. "You anticipated this?" "I plan for risk," I replied. He opened the folder slowly. Inside was a property listing. His property. The house I grew up in. Highlighted sections. Market analysis. Sales status. He stared at it, realization creeping across his face. "You're not suggesting." "I already did," I interrupted gently. Silence filled the small office. "You bought it?" he whispered. "Yes." His hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the purchase confirmation documents. "That house has been in our family for 20 years. And, legally," I replied calmly. "It was listed when your refinancing fell through." He closed the folder slowly. Mom appeared at the doorway then, having clearly been waiting outside. "Richard?" she asked nervously. He turned to her. "She bought it." Mom's face went pale. "You wouldn't," she breathed. "I did," I said. She stepped inside, clutching her purse tightly. "Why would you do something so cruel?" I tilted my head slightly. "Cruel?" Dad's voice hardened just a little. "You're punishing us." "No," I said quietly. "I'm protecting myself." Mom's eyes filled. "We would never throw you out." "Wouldn't you?" I asked softly. You told me that house wasn't mine when I chose a different path. You said I could always come back if I learned responsibility. She looked away. Dad straightened slightly, attempting authority again. What do you want? There it was. Not why. Not how could you. What do you want? I slid another document across the desk. A lease agreement, I said. You can stay in the house. Mom blinked rapidly. Stay? Yes. You'll pay monthly rent, market rate, on time, legally binding. Dad's jaw tightened. You expect us to pay you to live in our own home? I met his eyes without blinking. It's not yours anymore. The silence that followed was heavy. Not explosive. Just undeniable. Mom's voice trembled. You're turning your back on your family. I shook my head gently. No, I'm drawing boundaries. Dad stared at the lease. You're serious? Yes. He studied me for a long moment, searching for hesitation. There was none. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. I held his gaze. Because when you gave me that parking lot, I said slowly, you thought you were limiting my future. He didn't respond. You taught me something important that night, I continued. That nothing is guaranteed, that security can disappear, that ownership matters. Mom's tears fell silently now. I'm not throwing you out, I said. I'm offering terms. The same way you offered me terms my whole life. Dad swallowed hard. For the first time, I didn't see a powerful man across from me. I saw someone confronting consequences. He picked up the pen. Mom grabbed his wrist lightly. Richard. He looked at her, then at me. Then he signed. The sound of ink on paper felt louder than Tyler's shouting ever had. Mom hesitated longer. You'll regret this, she whispered. Maybe, I said, but I won't regret standing up for myself. She signed. When they finished, I gathered the documents carefully. Dad stood slowly. You've changed, he said. No, I replied. I stopped shrinking. They left quietly. No shouting, no threats. Just the sound of the office door closing behind them. I sat alone for a moment, staring at the signed lease. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like balance. For the first time in my life, the power dynamic had shifted not through anger, not through humiliation, but through preparation and discipline. They had tried to make me small. Instead, they taught me how to become unshakable. The first rent payment arrived exactly on time. Electronic transfer. No message attached. Just numbers on a screen. I stared at the confirmation longer than I expected to. Not because I needed the money, but because it represented something I had never had before. Accountability. For years, I had been the one adjusting. Compromising. Apologizing for being too ambitious, too sensitive, too independent. Now, the structure was different. Now there were terms. Legal ones. They stayed in the house. I stayed in control of my boundaries. And Starlot kept growing. We expanded into weekday lunch hours, introduced mentorship nights for young entrepreneurs, partnered with a women in trades nonprofit to sponsor certification programs. One evening, I stood at the center of the lot after closing, when the lights were still glowing but the crowd had gone home. The air was quiet. The sky stretched wide above me. The same stars Tyler had joked about. You can always sleep under them. I looked up and let myself breathe. Back then, it was meant to humiliate me. Now, it felt like a promise I fulfilled on my own terms. Sam walked up beside me, hands in his jacket pockets. Proud of you, he said simply. Thank you, I replied. Not just for the business, he added. For how you handled them. I smiled faintly. That part was harder. Yeah, he nodded. But it mattered. He was right. Building Starlot was work. Holding boundaries with family? That was discipline. Tyler still avoided me in public. Mom still sent occasional messages that started with, "We miss how things used to be." Dad rarely texted at all, but something subtle had shifted. When they spoke to me now, it wasn't with dismissal. It was with caution. Not fear. Not resentment. Recognition. They finally understood that I wasn't the version of Nora who would fold at a raised eyebrow or a sarcastic laugh. I had paperwork now. I had revenue. I had leverage. More importantly, I had self-respect. One night during a community fundraiser, a teenage girl approached me near the stage. "Are you the owner?" she asked nervously. "Yes. My dad says I should get a real job," she said quietly. But I want to start something of my own. I saw myself in her. The doubt, the hunger, the need to be taken seriously. Build it, I told her. And make sure it's legal, documented, and yours. She smiled. That moment meant more to me than any argument I'd won, because that was the difference between revenge and growth. Revenge feels loud and temporary. Growth feels steady, permanent. As for my family, we exist in a different rhythm now. They live in the house I legally own. They pay rent. We speak politely. There are no more jokes about parking lots. No more comments about sleeping under the stars. Just space. And, sometimes, space is healthier than forced closeness. Standing there under the lights, I realized something important. My father thought he was giving my brother a kingdom and me a burden, but he gave me something far more powerful. He gave me a blank foundation. And I turned it into an empire. Not one built on marble floors and ocean views, but one built on contracts, courage, and choice. So if you're ever handed something that feels like an insult, a cracked slab of concrete, a dismissed opportunity, a laugh meant to shrink you, remember this: empty space isn't nothing. It's potential waiting for someone brave enough to see it. And sometimes, the stars you're told to sleep under become the lights that guide you home.